Hello Internet, my name is Andrew Witter, and welcome to another episode of Film Editorials. The topic of today's video is a little movie you might have heard of called Star Wars: The Last Jedi, I think? Since this is such a big, interesting, complicated, important movie for me anyway to talk about, there's really no way I can talk about this movie without spoiling something, because basically everything that happens in it is some kind of mystery that was waiting to be revealed. So there are going to be lots of spoilers in this video. If you haven't seen the film yet, pause this video, go out to your movie theater, watch The Last Jedi, come back and finish the video. Why have you taken so long to do that already? In addition to lots of discussion of spoilers, the other thing that's going to be different about this video is that I think I'm going to start with my star rating, and I'm going to have to give Star Wars: The Last Jedi 5 stars out of 5. And not just because it's a Star Wars movie. I absolutely love the characterization and Mark Hamill's acting for the character of Luke Skywalker. The broad themes of this movie and the various messages that the different characters go through are all really important and really interesting and really well developed. And the fight scenes are basically everything you could possibly want from a Star Wars fight scene. They're new, they're exciting, and they're also familiar. As far as negatives go, the pacing is odd at some points. There are numerous, you could say even many times, when logic isn't important to the story they're trying to tell, and while I don't expect the movie to satisfy every logical thing, there are a lot of logical gaps that happen, and I think these play into the pacing problems, amplifying them both. And then because the movie has pacing issues, and it's also very ambitious with the scope it's trying to cover, some of the characters get short shrift, in my opinion. Now that I've given you the overview, let's go into some details for the things I'm talking about. Let's start with discussing Luke Skywalker. In The Last Jedi, his character is simply perfect. Obviously, in the original trilogy, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, he's the main character, so we kind of have to like him, but in this movie, I love his characterization. It's so spot on to what his character was, and who he would be 30 years after that, and Mark Hamill does an amazing job portraying him. Basically, every second he's on screen, I forget I'm watching a movie. It's just perfect. In all honesty, I don't understand any of the people who are basically complaining on the internet about how his character doesn't mesh with who he was in the original trilogy, and that's just not true. In Return of the Jedi, we see him struggle with almost killing his father, a person he's, specifically set out to try and save. So the fact that he basically goes through the same thing when dealing with his nephew, who seems to be even more evil and more powerful, that's not a surprise, that's in keeping with character. And then he deals with an emotion that we don't see in movies very often, and that's shame. He feels such strong shame at the time about trying to kill Ben that he regrets his action immediately, which he discusses in the movie, and then he punishes himself, sequestering himself to an island on the beyond the edges of the galaxy so no one can find him. And the shame over a momentary lapse of judgment that he doesn't even act upon is so strong that when someone finally does find him and confronts him about the thing he's shameful for, he continues to lie about it. That's amazing characterization. That's just an amazing set of emotions. It's so human and real, and it's honestly something that we really aren't used to in Star Wars films. And I love Star Wars movies, but we don't see that level of emotional complexity. Like, the most emotional complexity we got in the prequel trilogy was Anakin's dislike of sand. And then, towards the end of the movie, he realizes that he does actually have to help out, and he does in a big way, literally saving the Resistance and then causing them to inspire the rest of the galaxy to rise up against the First Order. That's how that story plays out. And that scene is amazing, from John Williams' score, which is always really good, but in this instance it was particularly awesome, and then just the force powers Luke has at his command, those were fantastic. And for the emotional complexity and the awesomeness of the final sort of fight scene, it's the reason why I give this movie 5 stars. It's so good it makes up for the shortcomings, which there are shortcomings, but just the quality of Luke's characterization and the quality of Mark Hamill's performance gives this movie 5 stars for me. I don't think his death was necessary. I understand how it fits into the storyline. He seemed to be getting better after the force projection fight scene, so I thought he was gonna make it okay, and then he didn't. And so that, I don't know, I don't like it, but I understand how it fits into the story. It's not the story I would tell, but still I think the rest of the story is really good, and so I'm okay with it. I assume he's going to come back as a Force Ghost for 9, so I'll live with it, even if he doesn't. I mentioned that the fight scenes were amazing, and I think we can all agree that the fight scenes are amazing. I am specifically thinking of the lightsaber battle in Snoke's chamber, because that scene was so cool. Easily one of the best choreographed lightsaber battles we've seen. The only one I think that can give it any run for its money in terms of quality of choreography is The Phantom Menace. On an emotional level, that scene also works really well, so it's better than most of the other things in the prequels, which tended to have better choreography, but the emotions never felt really there. The emotion in this scene feels very accessible, and I'm sitting on the edge of my seat the entire time I'm watching this fight play out, and I've seen it twice now, so I can't say every time. The Last Jedi also has a space battle to start things off, which is always a nice addition, and it's got the battle on Crait, which is kinda like Hoth, but not enough like Hoth for me to sit there going, I'm just rewatching a Battle of Hoth, which is good. It's familiar and new, and not too familiar that I'm thinking, hey, we could just be watching the Battle of Hoth, because we're not. It's vastly different from that. Since I just talked about Luke, and now I've been obliquely referencing Rey, I am really glad that neither one of them turned to the dark side. That was one of the things I was nervous about going into it, because I didn't want either of those things to happen, and since neither of those things did happen, I'm very pleased. I was really excited to see that all the good guys remain good guys. I also mentioned that the ethos, or the morals of the movie, are really good. What makes a hero is really good. Poe has to deal with that. Luke has to deal with that. The question of redemption is still up in the air a little bit. I don't know how they could possibly redeem Kylo at this point, but you never know. We didn't think Vader could get redeemed either, and look where we are. And then we get to see more immediately what the Resistance is fighting for in the form of Kelly Marie Tran's Rose character. Also, there's a little bit of Ratatouille sprinkled into this movie vis-a-vis the Force. In the original trilogy, it's this nebulous religion that no one really takes time to explain, which, you know, honestly worked fine. And then in the prequel trilogy, we hear some pseudoscience about it, and it gets into the questions of genetics and who can and can't be a Jedi, and I think that got people off on the wrong foot about what kind of people can be a Jedi, meaning they all have to be related to each other, and we know that's not the case just from looking at the roster of who's a Jedi. Not everyone's related, so it's not all about genetics. But it still is a little bit about genetics, because Kylo Ren is the son of Leia, and Leia is the daughter of Anakin Skywalker, and they're all strong Force users. So it makes sense that there's a little bit of genetic component, but at the same time, this movie has the same message as Ratatouille, which is anyone can cook. Not everyone can be a Jedi, but you don't have to come from someplace special to be a Jedi. You can just have the Force, and that's normal and fine, and good job. A message which is driven home at the end of the film with the kid who can force pull the broom to his hand. I liked that scene. It was unconventional, certainly as far as Star Wars goes, and I felt that it was very much in keeping with the point of the movie and the point of Luke Skywalker's sacrifice, which was to inspire hope in a whole new generation of Star Wars fans and people living in the galaxy far, far away to fight against the First Order, which we see immediately prior to the Force pulling the broom scene with the kid telling the story of Luke's sacrifice. So the fact that it's unconventional didn't faze me because it works. It wasn't really random and out there. It fit. It had a place in the story. Probably the most serious problem this movie has is one of pacing, and it's odd, because the second time I watched the film I didn't notice the problem as much. Like I could pinpoint moments when I was like, this timing is strange. But it didn't bother me the second time. I think the second time I saw the movie I actually enjoyed it a little bit more than the first. Sure, some of the surprises were gone, but I still had a really good time. One of the issues with the pacing is that we get a firm deadline for when the Resistance ship is going to run out of fuel, and then the other storylines, the other threads of the tale don't seem to correspond with the amount of time given. And the problem here is most visible, I think, when you're cutting back and forth between the Resistance ships and Rey. Now, it's possible that those are taking place at different times, but we're not sure of that, so sometimes it seems like more than a day has passed for Rey, even in between her own scenes. The pacing issue also rears its head on Canto Bight with Finn and Rose. I feel like there's a lot of antics in the casino that got cut out. It feels like I'm missing something when I watch the Canto Bight scenes. Like they show up and things aren't going well, and then they get arrested, and then they escape. Ta-da, we're done. That section confused me. Like I love the visuals of the casino, and like I said, discussing the morals with Rose's character and how she feels about the Resistance and the First Order, that all works, and discussing the hive of scum and villainy that is all these war profiteers, that all works, and that's all important messages to get across. But it just kind of happens all at once. And then there are other smaller timing issues, like the bomber is flying over the dreadnought, and it's just in position, and then like 30 seconds later it's still just in position. That's kind of weird. And then at the end, the Resistance has time to land and do an inventory of all the stuff they have and prepare for the First Order to attack, and then conveniently the First Order shows up while they've all prepared. Like, they're not scrambling, they have time to talk about it, Luke shows up, they have time to talk about that, and the First Order just slowly walks towards the door. The other pretty consistent problem this movie has is one of logic. I use the word problem kind of hesitantly because movies aren't supposed to make logical sense 100% of the time. They're not geometric proofs trying to show you some scientific fact, usually. They are instead stories that are trying to elicit an emotional response from you. And in that sense, this movie does an amazing job. See my rant earlier about Luke. So there are times when logic doesn't necessarily have to make sense just because it's going for a simpler version to get the emotional point across. For example, the Resistance is fleeing the First Order, and they're getting chased. The fact that the First Order could theoretically send some ships in hyperspace ahead of the Resistance to cut them off doesn't really matter. Like, it matters on a logical level if you're looking for sound battle strategy, but you're not supposed to be looking for sound battle strategy. You're just supposed to understand that the First Order is chasing the Resistance, and it's a problem, and they have to get away from the First Order by doing all the stuff that Finn and Rose are up to, or just fleeing to Crate. That being said, there are a lot of those logical concessions you have to make in this film. Like, why would a casino known for handling rich people allow Rose and Finn to walk in grubby, oily clothes? There's a lot of little logical things that you can nitpick and pick apart, and some that are more valid than others, and it weighs the movie down. It'll knock you out of the movie-going experience a couple times. So, points off for that. Still, with Luke, it's not enough for me to take a star off, but it's an issue. I feel like I just ranted for like 30 seconds about nonsense, so let me know in the comments down below if that makes any sense to you. We can have a nice discussion down there. One of the other issues that, again, I think ties in with the pacing is how ambitious this movie is. It's the longest Star Wars movie thus far. It's over 2.5 hours, but they still add a whole bunch of stuff, and it feels like a lot of that stuff gets shortchanged. I already talked about the casino on Canto Bight feeling rushed, but there's also a whole bevy of characters that we're just introduced to in this movie, and not all of them feel like they've gotten the same amount of attention, or like they could have gotten more attention and the movie wouldn't have been worse off for it. So director Rian Johnson has introduced 3 completely brand new characters for this film: Rose, Laura Dern's Admiral Holdo, and DJ, played by Benicio del Toro. But we also spend more time with Poe than we did in The Force Awakens, so he's almost a new character. We spend a lot more time with Leia than we did in The Force Awakens. We spend way more time with Luke than we did in The Force Awakens. We spend more time with Snoke than we did in The Force Awakens. So that's like 7 basically new characters, or expanded characters, that we're dealing with. That's a lot. Thus, not all of them feel super well developed. I'm thinking specifically of DJ. He's complex as he is, and you see his trajectory, but it feels like you see 3 steps out of a staircase made of 15 stairs. Similarly, the scenes with Rose feel like they've included all the really essential ones. We don't see a lot of the middle ground of her character, so I feel like, again, she is rushed. Admiral Holdo doesn't feel so rushed to me because we see her at the start, we see her at the middle of her arc, and we see her at the end of the arc, and that just works. But the other characters feel like they used to have a bigger role, maybe? As far as Snoke goes, again, I've talked about how awesome that fight scene was, and that includes his interrogation of Rey, because that scene was fantastic. And the fact that he dies adds a lot of complexity to Kylo Ren's character, kind of throws things up in the air for Episode 9, which I'm excited about, because I think there's a lot of possibility for play between Hux and Kylo Ren, the conflict there, because Hux is older than Ren and knows that Ren isn't the supreme leader that Snoke was. Obviously, I'm curious where Snoke came from. I'm looking forward to the novel or the comic book or whatever medium Disney decides to explore with Snoke, because there's no way they're going to leave that stone unturned. They're going to talk about it at some point. But to people who are complaining, you gotta remember, the story's not about Snoke. It's about Kylo Ren, and it's about Rey. Snoke's history doesn't really influence that. Think back to The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. We don't really know who the Emperor is. We just know he's bad and powerful. We don't know that he's from Naboo and his first name is Sheev. We didn't even know his first name was Sheev until like 3 years ago. Okay, I think that's all I'm gonna say in this video. I could talk about this film for hours and hours and days, but I don't want this video itself to be like an hour and a half long, so I'm gonna cut it off here, and we can continue the conversation in the comments. Let me know what you thought of Star Wars The Last Jedi. Feel free to go nuts with spoilers. As far as speculation for Episode 9 goes, I don't think there's a lot we can discuss, because who knows what's gonna happen. I mean, we all have our theories, but as we saw with this film, I think if we get too involved in our own theories, then we can be disappointed if those theories don't hold up to the light of day. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like, favorite, share, subscribe, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Snapchat. And as always, don't forget to check out my friends over at The Good News Review, tgnreview.com, or check out their app in the App Store for Apple devices. I'm not an Apple guy, I don't know what it's called. They are an online newspaper of sorts that deals exclusively with substantive, good news stories, things that will improve your day instead of the 24 hours of terrible, scary things that you see on most news services. That's it for today. I'll see you guys down below in the comments, and may the Force be with you. Bye!